Hello friends, welcome to my channel, Only True Crime. Please share your views and feedbacks in the comments for me to improve and do better. Delhi's winter evenings move to a rhythm of their own. Narrow lanes lie wrapped in a hush, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and dinners cooking behind closed doors. But on one such evening in January 1996, that familiar quiet was shattered by something unthinkable. Inside a seemingly ordinary home in Vasant, Kunj, a nightmare unfolded, one that had long been feared. A nightmare that the victim herself had warned against, and one that would go on to shake the very conscience of the country. This is the story of that Delhi night, of one house in Vasant, Kunj, and of one woman trapped within it, face to face with evil. This is the story of Priyadarshini Mattoo. The case I'm bringing to you today is one that fundamentally changed India. The name Mattoo. Maybe you've come across it in crime forums or seen it listed among India's most notorious criminal cases. I had heard of it, too, mostly through listener suggestions or the occasional article, but I didn't really know the details. It all begins on the early evening of January 23, 1996, in the quiet residential lanes of Vasant, Kunj, New Delhi. Househelp Virendra Prasad stepped out for a routine chore, walking the family dog. The winter air, rich with the smell of burning wood and simmering spices, offered a kind of comfort against the cold. When he left House B 10709, the only person inside was 25-year-old Priyadarshini Mattoo, a third-year law student. She locked the door behind him, a basic safety measure in any Indian household, and returned to her books, preparing for upcoming exams. But not long after, around 5:30 p.m., her personal security officer Rajendra Singh and a constable arrived for their routine check-in. Something felt off. The front door was ajar, slightly open. That was unlike Priya. She always kept it shut. Now, if you're wondering why she had a PSO in the first place, we'll get to that. Because as we've seen in other cases, Sujata Suvalasi, or even a murder of T-Series founder Gulshan Kumar, when there's a PSO involved, it's often a sign that danger is already circling. And tragically, in most of those stories, the PSO arrives too late to stop it. As Officer Rajendra stood at that open door, a chill ran down his spine. Something wasn't right. He had been assigned to protect Priya for almost a year now, for a reason. She had been stalked. She had filed multiple complaints, submitted proof, made repeated visits to the police. And, finally, she had been given protection. But now, the worst fears were becoming real. Just then, househelp Virendra returned with the dog. The three men stood at the doorway, calling out to her. No answer. Knocking. Silence. And so they stepped inside. As Officer Rajendra reached the bedroom, he stopped cold. Blood on the mattress, on the floor. Then he saw it, a hand sticking out from under the bed. He shouted for the constable. Together, they lifted the bed and uncovered Priyadarshini Mattoo's body. They lift the bed, and there she is. Priyadarshini's lifeless body lies beneath it. Her jeans are slightly pulled down. An electric heater's cord is still wrapped tightly around her neck. Blood seeps from her mouth. Her face, swollen and unrecognizable. It's a horrifying scene. Rajendra's hands tremble as he fumbles to reach the radio. In the doorway, househelp Virendra stands frozen, paralyzed. Outside, life continues. Children play a pressure cooker whistles. But for Virendra, all sound has vanished. Silence takes over. His stomach turns as he tries to stop the family dog from rushing in. The same dog Priya had walked countless times. The same one she fed biscuits to that very morning. Now, it pulls at the leash with urgency, as if it too can sense the tragedy inside. Virendra remembers her laugh, that warm. Her once vibrant laughter had gradually disappeared over the past year, replaced by a quiet fear for her life. Now, As Virendra scans the room, his eyes catch a smear of blood on the wall. The grim confirmation that Priyadarshini's deepest fear had come true that night. A wave of nausea washes over him as he thinks of his own sister's back in the village, unable to comprehend how anyone could carry out such a horrific act. He stumbles back, gripping the gate for balance. Later, he would remember the sharp metallic scent of blood hanging in the air, mingling strangely with the comforting aroma of fried onions drifting from a neighbor's kitchen, a surreal contrast in that winter dusk. Within minutes, a constable sprints to the nearby police station, and soon the quiet lanes of Vasant are flooded with flashing lights, murmuring onlookers, and the murmurs of concerned neighbors. Inspector Surendra Sharma, the station house officer, files the initial report at 5:45 p.m. and immediately orders the area to be cordoned off. Investigators begin combing the scene, collecting strands of hair, fragments of a broken helmet, one that doesn't appear to belong to the house, and samples of blood. Flashbulbs pop as officers document the scene, capturing haunting, grainy images of violence that will later fill newspaper pages and, eventually, television screens. As the investigation unfolds, at 7:30 p.m., the front gate creaks open. Priyadarshini's parents, Chaman Lal and Rajeshwari Mattoo, arrive home to find police tape and a growing crowd gathered outside. Alarmed, Chaman Lal pushes through the onlookers, his heart pounding. A constable tries to hold him back, but he breaks past him and enters. The moment his eyes fall on his daughter's body, a guttural wail escapes him. Rajeshwari collapses beside him. The brutal reality is instantly clear. Their lives have been irrevocably broken. Just hours earlier, they had been sitting through routine civil proceedings at the Tiz Hazuri Court in Delhi, expecting to finish early and return home in time for evening tea with their daughter. They had shared a laugh over a friend's joke about lawyers who drag cases endlessly and made plans to visit relatives the following weekend. As they drove home through Delhi's bustling traffic, their conversation turned to the price of vegetables, everyday concerns that offered no hint of the storm looming ahead. When Chaman Lal heard the distant cries and saw the flashing police lights, a cold instinct told him something was terribly wrong. Neighbors would later recall how his anguished scream echoed through the corridors, and how Rajeshwari's body went limp as she collapsed on the steps, unable to rise. That moment, on that day, marked the tragic end of Priyadarshini's life, but it also sparked the beginning of a fight for justice that would resonate in Indian homes for generations to come. To truly understand how this day came to be, we must go back and trace the beginnings of Priyadarshini's story. Priyadarshini Mattoo was born on July 23, 1970, in Srinagar, Kashmir, into a loving, middle-class Kashmiri Pandit family. Her early years were steeped in the vibrant sights and sounds of the Kashmir Valley, the almond trees blossoming in spring, the saffron fields turning purple in autumn, and the soft hum of prayers of the local temple. Her father served as a chief engineer for the Power Development Department of Jammu and Kashmir, while her mother managed the household with quiet, unwavering dedication. Priyadarshini's parents instilled in their children a deep love for education and a strong sense of fairness. These values shaped Priyadarshini into a curious child. She devoured books, asked endless questions, and argued passionately about everything from bedtime rules to politics. In 1989, as militancy escalated in Kashmir, the Mattoo family, like thousands of other Pandit families, was forced to flee. They left behind their ancestral home, entrusting the keys to neighbors they might never see again. Carrying only what fit into a suitcase, photo albums, a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, and a handful of jewelry, they embarked on an uncertain journey. They spent nights in crowded camps in Jammu, enduring heat and swarms of mosquitoes, unsure if they would ever return. Priyadarshini was 19 then, old enough to grasp that she had lost far more than possessions. She had lost a part of her identity. Despite these upheavals, Priyadarshini remained relentless in her pursuit of education. She completed a Bachelor of Commerce degree in Jammu. Family friends from that time recall her engrossed in legal thrillers, often sharing her dream of helping people fight for their rights. Known for her sharp wit, she could mimic Bollywood actors flawlessly, bringing humor even to the darkest conversations. Priyadarshini made a bold move to Delhi to pursue an LLB at Delhi University's Campus Law Center. For a young Kashmiri woman in her early 20s, Delhi was a bustling and often intimidating city, but Priyadarshini embraced it fully. She joined debate clubs, volunteered with legal aid groups, and discovered a passion for criminal law. Navigating the city alone on buses and auto rickshaws, she moved with a blend of caution and confidence. At first, Priyadarshini lived in a coeducational hostel at the Institute of Economic Growth, then stayed at a relative's home in Rajuri Garden, and later at the residence of Lieutenant Colonel Eskadar in Sadar, before eventually moving into her uncle's flat, Flat B 107098 in Waskin. Each move marked a new chapter in her life, bringing new friendships and increasing independence. Priyadarshini's dreams, much like her, were simple yet ambitious. She wanted to practice law and, perhaps one day, become a judge. She spoke to her father about starting a law firm that would provide affordable legal representation to women who couldn't otherwise afford lawyers. To her mother, she sometimes expressed a desire to change the system that lets the powerful get away. Deeply spiritual, she often recited Kashmiri hymns, but also embraced modern ideas. Friends described her as modern but rooted. A woman who could wear jeans and passionately argue constitutional rights one moment, and in the next prepare a traditional Kashmiri hawk for dinner. No one could have imagined that one man's obsession would so abruptly and violently shatter all her dreams. And this man wasn't some stranger she never saw coming. He was part of her world. Santosh Kumar Singh was born into a privilege few men in the country could claim. The son of J.P. Singh, an Indian police service officer who later became Joint Commissioner of Police in Chandigarh, Santosh grew up surrounded by official bungalows, domestic help, and security staff. He attended prestigious schools, rode motorcycles, and boasted about his father's influence. By the time he enrolled at the Campus Law Center, Santosh carried the unmistakable air that only powerful connections can grant. Then, in 1994, he noticed Priyadarshini for the first time. He was a final-year student. She was just beginning her first year. At first, he casually bumped into her in places she frequented, then started conversations offering to help with her studies. Soon, he was waiting outside her classrooms just to catch a glimpse or exchange a few words. When Priyadarshini showed disinterest, she caught her first glimpses of anger in him. By early 1995, those sparks of anger had escalated into relentless harassment, stalking, and various forms of assault. He followed her across campus, revving his bullet motorcycle to get her attention, humiliating her in front of classmates, professors, and friends. Friends remember him saying, "You will be mine whether you like it or not." After repeated rejection, he began calling her incessantly at home, leaving notes on her desk, and even showing up at her hostel with unwanted gifts, all of which she refused. In January 1995, Santosh escalated his stalking by following Priyadarshini on his motorcycle as she drove and once tried to force her car to stop at a traffic signal. That incident prompted Priyadarshini to file one of her first police complaints at the Airpur police station. Santosh was detained, made to sign an undertaking not to harass her, and then released. These complaints to the police and their outcomes were clear examples of Santosh using his father's position to intimidate Priyadarshini. Every time she reported him, he was summoned to the police station and made to sign a statement promising to stay away. But this compliance was only superficial. He would show up again the very next day, fully aware that no one could really stop him. It was like he was telling the police, "I promise, fingers crossed. I'm not going to do it." And everyone knew how that usually ended. This pattern, signing multiple undertakings after repeated harassment complaints, was a blatant abuse of power. In most cases, once a statement like this is violated, the authorities should not accept another promise. But here, the promises were accepted again and again, a privilege few enjoy. I mean, imagine being able to just walk into a police station, sign a statement, and get away with ongoing harassment. That's not how it works for most people. Then in August 1995, Santosh followed her all the way home to Vasant Kunj and even tried to break open the door of her residence. Priyadarshini called the police and filed yet another complaint. Once again, he was let off after giving a written promise to stay away. If this sounds frustrating to you, imagine what it felt like for Priyadarshini. So scared, so irritated, so exhausted, that she pleaded with the police not to close her complaint, just to keep it pending out of fear that he would strike again. In one of her complaints, she even mentioned that he had threatened to acid attack her if she did not accept his advances, a chilling early sign of his violent tendencies. But Santosh seemed to enjoy this cruel cat-and-mouse game, always staying one step ahead of the law because of his connections. When charm, candor, lavish displays of affection, or even threats failed to sway Priyadarshini, he escalated to more aggressive forms of harassment, actions that had serious, real-life consequences for her and her education. Priyadarshini formally reported Santosh's behavior to the authorities, who then assigned her a personal security officer for protection. Yet despite this, Santosh's stalking did not cease. When even the PSO couldn't provide the support she needed, Priyadarshini took her complaints to the dean of Delhi University's law faculty, submitting a written complaint about Santosh's harassment on campus. The dean admonished Santosh and advised him to desist from such activities, but this too had little effect. After one attempt to break into her apartment, Santosh began showing up at her uncle's home in Vasant Kunj at odd hours, revving his motorcycle outside her gate and frightening neighbors. On another occasion, he threatened to teach her a lesson right in front of her uncle. Each time, Priyadarshini went to the police and the complaints were formally recorded, but Santosh faced no real consequences. The police issued warnings but never arrested him, citing a lack of legal provisions to address stalking. When authorities threatened to file a case, calls from his father, the influential IPS officer, quickly ensured no action was taken. Then, in November 1995, Santosh launched perhaps his most blatant attack, grabbing Priyadarshini's arm at the campus law center and refusing to let go, violating her physical space in full view of others. Though the incident thankfully did not escalate further, Priyadarshini promptly filed a fresh complaint. This time, an FIR, number 129/95, was registered under IPC Section 354, which covers assault or criminal force to outrage a woman's modesty, at the Maurice Nagar police station. Santosh was arrested for the incident, a rare and significant step, but was quickly released on a personal bond, essentially a written promise to appear in court. Despite this brief arrest, no serious punishment followed, and the harassment resumed almost immediately. By this point, Priyadarshini's parents had even visited Santosh's father, the high-ranking IPS officer, pleading with him to control his son's behavior. They asked him to make his son stop troubling Priya, but their plea fell on deaf ears. As the year drew to a close, Priyadarshini lived in a constant state of vigilance. She had changed addresses multiple times in a desperate attempt to escape Santosh, underscoring how she was forced to live like a fugitive, always looking over her shoulder, never feeling safe in any one place for long. She eventually installed heavy bolts on her doors and kept a kitchen knife under her pillow for protection. 15 months had passed since the stalking and harassment began, and those close to Priya could see the toll it was taking on her. She was described as a nervous wreck. By December 1995, her brother said she had become unusually anxious and jumpy. Friends recalled her confessing that she feared she might be killed. Despite all this, she refused to leave Delhi. She wanted to finish law school and confront her harasser. Her father often asked if she wanted to return to Jammu, but she would respond, "If I run away now, I'll have to run all my life." So, she stayed. For her sense of freedom, she stayed. Even after filing half a dozen complaints with no meaningful action, she remained. She watched the pattern of abuse escalate and persist right up until the day she died. That resilience is a part of her personality that I deeply admired while researching this case. As a citizen, Priya did nearly everything possible to protect herself. As an aspiring lawyer, she also used her knowledge to safeguard herself in ways many others cannot. It's important to recognize that what she faced is a reality for many women across India and the world. But Priya had the privilege and education to actively assert her civil rights and fight for them. Filing multiple complaints is something most women are unable to do. Thanks to her legal background, she not only had access to the police, but also knew exactly what laws to invoke, whether for stalking, assault, or other charges under the IPC. She did everything she could, but clearly it was all to no avail. I was just thinking, if this were happening today, in 2025, this is exactly the kind of woman who might be driven to take to social media to expose this man. We often see in college or elsewhere, when incidents like stalking or toxic breakups happen, people post about the perpetrator or alleged perpetrator. And usually there's pushback. People say social media isn't the right place for that. But stories like this make you question that. Would social media be the right medium in cases like this? Honestly, if there had been a social media tag exposing this man's stalking, it would have shown a permanent spotlight on him, a lasting public record of his harassment. While some instinctively feel that such cases should be private and not aired on social media, the truth is we often don't know the full reality. One of the most powerful things about social media, beyond mob justice, is the chance for what you might call social media justice, especially for people who have exhausted every other avenue. That's a truly commendable aspect of social media that often gets overlooked. It's heartbreaking to imagine what it was like for Priyadarshini in 1990s India, where society largely seemed to say, "This is it. We can't do any more." And yet, Priyadarshini could almost sense the day drawing closer, the day when something would go terribly wrong. That day began with an ordinary routine, so ordinary that, looking back, it feels like watching a slow-motion train wreck. You want to shout at everyone involved to change their course, but you can't because it all started mundanely. At 9:15 a.m., Priyadarshini drove her parents to the Hazari courts for a civil matter. After dropping them off, she headed to university for a lecture scheduled from 11:15 a.m. to noon, accompanied by her personal security officer, Rajendra Singh. When the lecture ended, she tried to find her parents amid the chaos at the court, but couldn't locate them. So, at 1:45 p.m., she decided to return home. She told Rajendra he could take a break and come back at 5:30 p.m., since she planned to spend the afternoon inside, studying quietly. She believed she would be safe as long as she kept the door locked and waited for everyone else to return. After all, her house help, Virendra, would be there too. She wouldn't be completely alone. Back at the flat, she prepared a simple lunch of rice, dal, and vegetables, which she shared with Virendra. But at 2:30 p.m., Virendra said he had to step out to run some errands. Alone now, Priya changed into jeans and a sweater and settled down to study. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room, while the only sounds were the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional bark of the family dog. Later, Virendra returned and took the dog out for his routine evening walk, leaving Priya by herself once again. She might have taken a quick nap, or perhaps listened to a cassette tape of Kashmiri folk music, We'll never truly know. As the afternoon wore on, Priya's anxiety grew. She kept glancing at the clock. It was 4:45 p.m., and her personal security officer was due to return at 5:30. But on this day, time seemed to slow. Then, at 4:50 p.m., the doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, Priya saw the one person she never wanted to see again, Santosh, standing outside with his black helmet casually slung over his shoulder. He wore the smirk that had haunted her for months. He said he just wanted to talk. She hesitated, but refusing him could provoke him. She had seen the consequences of that before, and so she opened the door just enough to peek out, keeping her hand on the edge to slam it shut if it needed, but he forced his way in. Around that time, the neighbors later described hearing muffled voices coming from within the house, then a heavy thud, then another and another. Santosh's frustration and years of entitlement had exploded into violence inside that home. That is when he raped her. Her screams were stifled, first by hand, then by the electric heater's cord that he wrapped around her neck. He strangled her until her body convulsed and then went limp. But it didn't stop there. He then picked up his motorcycle helmet and repeatedly smashed it into her face once, twice, over and over, 14 times in total with that helmet until the bones in her face cracked and blood sprayed all over the room. The dull sound of that helmet against her head echoed through the small flat. Then he dragged her under the double bed, perhaps believing he'd concealed his crime, wiped his hands on a curtain in the room, picked up his broken helmet. Imagine the force required to break a helmet, and calmly walked out, closing the door behind him, but leaving it slightly ajar for Priyadarshini's PSO to notice just a short while later. Outside, Santosh was observed by the building's security supervisor, Deep Singh Alwalia, and a neighbor. They saw him straighten his collar, mount his bullet motorcycle, and speed away. No one stopped him. After all, he was the son of a senior police officer. Soon after, Rajendra Singh arrived and discovered the horrific, bloody scene. Virendra returned with the dog, only to realize that the family he served would never be the same. After the police completed their investigation at the scene, Priyadarshini's body was taken to Safdarjung Hospital for a post-mortem. Doctors recorded 19 injuries, including 3 fractured ribs, bruises on her chest and arms, and brain swelling. They confirmed strangulation as the cause of death and documented injuries consistent with sexual assault. This autopsy report would later become a critical piece of evidence in the prosecution's case. With the crime scene secured, the police now focused their investigation on the prime suspect. Santosh was not difficult to locate. Living with his parents in Delhi and working as a junior lawyer, he was picked up by the police for questioning late on the night of January 23rd into the early hours of the 24th. Inspector Lalith Mohan noticed swelling on Santosh's right hand and sent him to Safdarjung Hospital for examination. Doctors there documented 2 injuries, a swollen right hand and multiple old scars on his chest and legs. An X-ray revealed a fracture in the 5th metacarpal bone, consistent with striking a blunt object. The police collected nail scrapings and hair samples from Santosh before releasing him on the condition that he would return the following day. The very next day, the Commissioner of Police received a letter from the Chief Secretary of Delhi requesting that the case be transferred to the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI. The swift transfer of the case to the CBI raised questions. Was it due to the sheer number of police complaints Priya had filed? Or was it a move orchestrated by Santosh's father, a senior police officer, to shift the investigation to an agency where he might wield more influence? Experts say there's no record supporting the latter theory. In fact, transferring a case to the CBI usually strengthens the investigation rather than weakens it. Rapid CBI involvement in cases without high-profile connections is rare, making this case stand out. The reality is likely more straightforward. The repeated complaints, the sheer brutality of the crime, and the fact that it occurred in a prominent area like Vasant, Kunj, combined with the victim being a law student under police protection, created immense pressure. Authorities were likely aware of the potential public backlash over the handling of Priyadarshini's case. The letter requesting the CBI take over explicitly mentioned the victim's complaint against the son of an IPS officer and the family's lack of confidence in the Delhi police's ability to investigate fairly. Within hours, the CBI took over the investigation, giving the Mattoo family and activists a renewed sense of hope, a real chance at justice. With its national jurisdiction, greater resources, and theoretical independence, the CBI seemed poised to deliver. However, their investigation soon exposed significant flaws in India's forensic and legal systems. At that time, DNA fingerprinting was still a relatively new technology in Indian courts. The CBI sent samples of blood, semen, and hair to two separate forensic labs. One lab confirmed a match to Santosh, while the other reported the samples were too degraded to yield conclusive results. Defense lawyers quickly seized on this discrepancy, accusing the CBI of evidence contamination and arguing that the hair found could belong to someone else entirely. The chain of custody for critical evidence was also called into question. For example, the helmet visor, a crucial piece, was reportedly left in an officer's drawer for days before being analyzed, and the electric cord was handled by multiple officers without gloves. Witness statements were improperly signed, and even the time of death became a point of contention. Some forensic experts placed it between 4:30 and 5 p.m., while others suggested an earlier time, raising doubts about whether Santosh could have left unnoticed. From the sidelines, the Mattoo family watched with growing frustration. They felt the CBI wanted to appear thorough, yet doubted a conviction was truly the goal. Suspicions lingered that Santosh's father, still a senior police officer, was exerting influence behind the scenes. When questioned by journalists, CBI officers remained tight-lipped. One senior investigator privately acknowledged that the case was complicated by pressure from above. Yet, despite these challenges, a significant milestone was reached. In April 1996, the CBI filed the charge sheet, naming Santosh as the sole accused, a step forward for those fighting for justice. More than 50 witnesses were called to testify, including neighbors, security supervisors, doctors, forensic experts, and police officers. The CBI invoked sections 302 and 376 of the Indian Penal Code, and on paper, the case seemed strong. Yet, as the trial approached, activists feared that sloppy investigation might allow Santosh to slip through the cracks, as it happened in countless cases across the country. The trial finally began over a year later, in August 1997, before additional sessions, Judge G.P. Thea. Over the next 2 years, witness after witness took the stand. Neighbors testified seeing Santosh near the house on the day of the murder. The security supervisor recounted watching him leave the building. The domestic helped describe seeing his motorcycle outside during the dog's walk. Doctors detailed the horrific injuries on Priya's body, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. Forensic experts explained how blood on the broken helmet visor matched Priya's. However, the defense mounted a fierce cross-examination. They highlighted inconsistencies in witness statements, questioned why the PSO arrived late that day, and seized on the conflicting DNA reports to challenge the reliability of the evidence. They raised doubts about the chain of custody and even suggested the possibility that someone else could have entered through an open window. With no CCTV footage and a heavy reliance on circumstantial evidence, Judge G.P. Thea faced a difficult decision. He found the circumstantial evidence compelling but incomplete. In his verdict, delivered on December 3, 1999, He listed 13 circumstances linking Santosh to the crime. The history of harassment, his presence at the scene, the broken visor with Priya's blood, the injuries on Santosh's hand, and the timing of the police call. Yet despite being convinced of Santosh's guilt, the judge acquitted him for lack of conclusive proof. He criticized the CBI for deliberately bungling the investigation, lamenting that he could not convict on moral certainty alone. This bold and audacious verdict shocked the nation. Many argued such judicial candor would be nearly impossible today, where political and institutional pressures are even greater. It highlighted the high standard of beyond reasonable doubt required for conviction, a bar that can sometimes mean that even those clearly guilty walk free when investigations falter. Despite this, the verdict ignited widespread outrage across India. Newspapers screamed headlines like "Killer Walks Free" and "Justice Denied Again," underscoring the painful frustration with a justice system many saw as failing victims like Priyadarshini. Every line of the judgment was dissected by legal experts and activists alike. Chairman Lal Mattoo spoke to the press, declaring that the system had betrayed his daughter. He accused a troubling nexus between the police, the CBI, and the courts, an unholy alliance that shielded the powerful from justice. Women's rights groups organized protests outside courthouses and across the city, turning the case into a rallying cry against systemic manipulation. For years, the case languished in the appellate registry, unresolved. Meanwhile, Santosh resumed his legal practice, married, and had a daughter. The fact that a man like Santosh went on to have a daughter left many shaken. When men like these raise daughters, one commentator noted, it's a haunting reminder of the trauma they've inflicted on others and the uncertain future that awaits their own children. Through all this, Priyadarshini's parents refused to give up. They knocked on every door: politicians, senior judges, activists, filed petitions, wrote letters to editors, and waited. For the Mattoo family, time was no longer measured in days or years, but in court dates and adjournments. Then, after nearly a decade of silence and struggle, a turning point came in February 2006, 10 years after the murder. India was rocked by another high-profile miscarriage of justice: the acquittal of all 9 accused in the Jessica Lal murder case. Jessica Lal was a model who had been shot dead in a Delhi bar in 1999. The accused were the sons of powerful politicians and businessmen who were initially freed due to lack of evidence. The man who pulled the trigger, Manu Sharma, was later convicted and served time, only to be released a few years ago. Ironically, the entire tragedy began over a refused drink. Jessica had declined to serve Manu Sharma a glass of alcohol after the bar had closed. The Jessica Lal case galvanized the public and sparked outrage across India, setting the stage for renewed demand for justice in cases like Priyadarshini's. In 2006, the acquittal of Jessica Lal's accused killers sparked an unprecedented public uproar. Candlelight marches lit up Delhi, drawing thousands of protesters to India Gate and beyond. Television channels ran round-the-clock coverage, while students held placards declaring, "I am Jessica." The wave of outrage forced the government to reopen the case, and the High Court eventually convicted the main accused. This groundswell of public anger didn't stop with Jessica Lal. It reached far beyond, touching the unresolved tragedy of Priyadarshini Mattoo. Inspired by the renewed hope for justice, a 16-year-old schoolgirl, whose identity remains protected, filed a petition in the Delhi High Court demanding a hearing in Priya's case. She argued that if the system could revisit Jessica's murder, then it should do the same for Priya. Her petition ignited a movement. Student groups from Delhi University and the National Law School of India sprang into action. Protests were organized, petitions circulated on early social networks like Orkut and Yahoo groups, and SMS chains called for vigils. Law students wrote mock judgments illustrating how circumstantial evidence could support a conviction. Public discussions on the death penalty and jurisprudence followed. Reuters later reported that Priya's case became one of India's first significant examples of media activism. On any given evening in mid-2006, crowds gathered at Jantar Mantar, candles in hand, chanting Priya's name and demanding justice delayed but not denied. Journalists reopened the story with investigative reports, exposing systemic failures to prevent stalking and harassment. They highlighted the stark contrast. While Santosh's father was promoted to Joint Commissioner of Police, Priya's family struggled to pay legal fees. The media helped humanize Priya, moving her beyond sensational headlines. She was portrayed as a daughter, a sister, a student whose dreams had been shattered. Law students spoke of their determination to see justice served. Chimanlal Mattoo, Priya's father, became a familiar figure on television. Frail, bespectacled, clutching his daughter's photograph, his voice trembling as he spoke. When meeting with students, he shared stories of Priya's love for Kashmiri music, her dream of starting a free legal clinic, and how she would call just to say she was safe. He made it clear his fight was not just for Priya, but for all daughters that Priya's mother, Rajeshwari, grieved quietly at home. Every morning, she lit incense sticks before her daughter's photograph, her own private protest and prayer. This wave of activism bore fruit. In August 2006, the Delhi High Court agreed to hear the appeal. Despite the court's usually crowded docket, a special slot was carved out for the case. The students who had sparked this incredible chain of events maintained their momentum, organizing courtroom diaries and posting daily updates online. Every day's progress was shared through text messages, spreading rapidly across the city, and sometimes even nationwide. As public pressure mounted, the CBI, now under intense scrutiny, prepared meticulously for what would become a pivotal moment in the pursuit of justice. The stage was set for a showdown between an emboldened citizenry and a justice system under fire. The appeal was heard by a division bench comprised of Justice R.S. Sodhi and Justice P.K. Basan. Over several months, arguments were presented, witnesses re-examined, and DNA evidence reinforced. The prosecution emphasized a persistent pattern of stalking and harassment. Santosh, now roughly 39 or 40 years old, was required to appear in court. Priya, had she lived, would have been 36. Though the case exposed the painful reality of delayed justice, it was by no means the slowest. Many cases drag on for decades without reaching an appeal or sparking public activism. In that context, a decade before retrial was a relatively swift turn of events. There's a sense of cautious hope here, despite the deep-rooted skepticism many in this generation harbor toward the legal system. Looking back at cases like the Indian oil tragedy, the Jessica Lal murder, or this one, it's clear that previous generations, far less equipped with technology and media tools, still managed to ignite powerful movements leading to real-time legal consequences. Young activists endured harsh conditions, standing in the blazing sun, the biting cold, for days and months. Yet, older generations and skeptics often dismiss these protesters as hippies wasting time, labeling them unproductive nuisances to society. But these young voices were anything but a nuisance. They were the driving force pushing the wheels of justice forward. I'll admit, sometimes I wonder if I'm guilty of the same skepticism toward protests, questioning their impact. But this case is a powerful reminder that change can come from a single voice, even one as small as that of a 16-year-old who dared to challenge the Indian legal system. That thought alone brings tears of joy. It shows that an individual, no matter how small their voice, can shake an entire system if they choose to speak up. And I'm grateful this case took the path it did. I hope it ends as it should. Inside the courtroom, the battle raged on. The prosecution presented documents revealing Santosh's malicious complaint filed against Priya at the university. They highlighted his fractured hand, the broken visor, reiterating the evidence from before. The defense tried again to dismantle the chain of custody, arguing that the High Court shouldn't overturn an acquittal based solely on circumstantial evidence. They suggested the visor could have broken earlier, floated theories of an unknown intruder, jealousy, or property disputes. But the judges pressed hard with tough questions. Then, on October 17, 2006, the verdict came. The courtroom was packed, students filling every aisle, television cameras lined the corridors. Justice R.S. Sodhi delivered a clear, searing judgment. Santosh was guilty of rape and murder. He revisited the 13 circumstances outlined by the earlier judge and methodically explained how each pointed to Santosh's guilt. He dismissed the defense's theories as speculative and criticized the CBI's mishandling of evidence, but stressed that despite those flaws, the collective weight of the evidence was overwhelming. The sentencing hearing followed on October 30, 2006. Justice Sodhi acknowledged the gravity of imposing the death penalty, quoting the Supreme Court's principle that it must be reserved for the rarest of rare cases. He emphasized that Santosh, being both the son of a police officer and a lawyer, should have embodied the law. Instead, he stalked and murdered a woman, defying warnings and promises alike. Then came the words that echoed across the nation. For a crime of this sort, there is no sentence but death. Outside the courtroom, the crowd erupted. Students embraced one another, tears of relief flowing freely. A long-awaited moment of justice finally served. The Mattoo family collapsed into each other's arms, overwhelmed with emotion. They expressed heartfelt thanks to the court, the activists, and the media. It felt like a moment of closure. Television channels flashed headlines boldly proclaiming, "Death for Santosh." For many Indians, this was the first time they truly believed that the courts could deliver justice against the powerful. But if you follow these cases closely, you know this joy can often be short-lived. Why? Why raise hope only to pull the rug out from under us? Despite everything, this was still a significant step forward. Where things would head next, we were about to find out. Santosh filed an appeal to the Supreme Court, represented by a team of seasoned lawyers. The bench, composed of Justice Jit Singh Bedi and Justice Chandra Mali Kumar Prasad, focused the arguments not on guilt, which was no longer in question, but on the sentence itself. The defense presented several mitigating factors. Santosh was about 24 at the time of the offense. At the time of his high court conviction in 2006, he had been free for 7 years, during which he had married and become a father. His father had died shortly after the high court judgment, leaving his mother dependent on him. He had no history of repeat offenses. The high court's conviction had overturned an earlier acquittal based solely on circumstantial evidence. And most importantly, they argued that the death penalty should only be applied when life imprisonment is insufficient. The prosecution stood firm, arguing once more that this crime met the rarest of rare criteria. Then, on October 6, 2010, the Supreme Court delivered its judgment. Santosh's conviction was upheld, but the death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. Supreme Court sentences Santosh Singh to life imprisonment. What was the reaction? Many had hoped the Supreme Court would uphold the death penalty, especially given the gravity of the crime. Instead, the verdict left families and civil society feeling utterly disappointed and shattered. The court acknowledged the severity of the crime, but stated that when even the court hesitates between death and life imprisonment, the lesser punishment must prevail. They noted there was no evidence Santosh was beyond reform and emphasized the passage of 14 years since the crime. For many, the commutation felt like a betrayal. Chairman Mattoo, Priya's father, told NDTV he was shattered and warned that civil society is at risk when sentences are lowered. Women's rights groups criticized the courts for seemingly giving more weight to the convict's family than to the victims themselves. The case didn't just end in the courtroom. It sparked national debate and became a case study in Indian law schools. What does the rarest of rare doctrine really mean? Does it mandate the death penalty when a crime is especially barbaric? How much should a convict's age, background, and potential for reform matter? The answers weren't clear-cut, and that ambiguity would follow the case for years. After the Supreme Court commuted his sentence, Santosh Singh was transferred from death row to the general prison population in Tihar jail. Initially, it was anything but easy. Inmates mocked him as a privileged man brought low. His arrogance became the subject of ridicule. He withdrew, spending much of his time poring over legal books and filing appeals. But over time, Santosh adapted. He began teaching fellow inmates their basic legal rights. He joined prison literacy programs, helping others read and write in Hindi and English. He picked up vocational training in tailoring, carpentry, and painting, and received multiple certificates for good conduct. In 2010, he enrolled in a Master of Laws program through Indira Gandhi National Open University. Studying under kerosene lamps, attending classes when allowed, he worked toward his degree. In 2017, after 14.5 years in prison, the Delhi High Court granted him 15 days of parole to sit for his exams. The parole came with strict conditions. He was to remain within Delhi limits, report daily to local police, and have no contact with the victim's family. He complied. There were no violations. He completed his exams and quietly returned to prison. Eventually, he earned his Master of Laws degree. By 2023, Santosh Singh had served over 25 years in prison. Under Delhi prison rules, life convicts who serve more than 20 years can apply for premature release. And so, in 2021, Santosh filed a petition with the Sentence Review Board, a committee made up of senior bureaucrats, police officials, and prison administrators. They unanimously rejected the plea. The SRB cited the heinous nature of the crime, the dual convictions for rape and murder, and the public message that early release would send. His lawyers, meanwhile, pointed to his reformation, his educational achievements, and his 25 years of incarceration, far longer than many others who had been released after 14 to 16 years for similar or worse crimes. The question remained, can a man convicted of one of India's most infamous crimes ever be considered reformed? And if so, what does justice demand? And so, in July 2025, Justice Sanjeev Narula of the Delhi High Court made a critical intervention. He overturned the Sentence Review Board's rejection of Santosh Singh's release plea and ordered a fresh review. Justice Narula called out the SRB's blanket rejection policy for heinous crimes, arguing that it failed to consider individual conduct, psychological assessments, and the legal right to rehabilitation. He instructed that all future reviews must include mental health evaluations. The order reignited a familiar debate. Supporters of release asked, after more than 2 decades, what purpose does continued incarceration serve, especially if a person has truly reformed? Opponents fired back. Santosh had never apologized, never shown genuine remorse. How can there be reform without accountability? Some went further. Releasing him, they said, would re-traumatize the Mattoo family and send a damaging message to survivors of gender-based violence across the country. Yet others argued, in a society that believes in justice, not revenge, even those who commit horrific crimes must be given a path back if they truly change. And now, as of September 2025, the nation waits. Santosh Singh remains in Tihar jail. His lawyers argue for redemption, but many still ask, how can there be redemption without remorse? No matter how many degrees he's earned, no matter how many inmates he's taught or programs he's led, without acknowledgement of harm, without apology, there can be no release. Activists remind us, remorse is essential. Even Manu Sharma, convicted in the Jessica Lal case, was only forgiven after he expressed sincere regret. As we await the review board decision, we're not just waiting for paperwork. We wait on behalf of those who can't wait anymore. Chaman Lal and Rajeshwari Mattoo, both long gone, maybe now in a place more peaceful, perhaps finally reunited with their daughter. They gave up everything for this case, their health, their savings, their peace. They spent years in courtrooms. They grew old chasing a justice system that moved too slow. When Chaman Lal died in 2012, a journalist wrote that he had died with justice half served. Rajeshwari passed away soon after. Their surviving children have since withdrawn from the public eye, finding little solace in a country that asked them to fight so hard for so little. And now we wait, not just for justice, but in memory. In protest, in persistence. Ask an 18-year-old today. She might remember Nirbhaya or Gauri Lankesh, but likely not Priyadarshini Mattoo. That is the tragedy of public memory. The mind forgets what the system fails to resolve. But maybe you, yes, you, can help keep the flame alive. Nearly 3 decades have passed since that cold January day in 1996. Somewhere in Vasant, Kunj, in a quiet corner, a small flat still stands. New tenants live there. Maybe they don't know what happened in those rooms. Maybe they've never heard Priyadarshini's name. But those walls, those doors, those floors, they remember. They carry echoes of a story that shaped a movement. And maybe on certain winter nights when the fog rolls in and a dog barks in the distance, if you listen closely, you might hear the faint sound of a helmet hitting the floor. Just so we never forget. Just so we can all keep the flame alive. The story of Priyadarshini Mattoo is not just about a brutal crime. It's about a justice system that faltered, a family that refused to give up, and a generation of young people who prove that activism can create real change. From the halls of law schools to candlelit vigils across Delhi, this case became a defining moment for India's fight against gender-based violence and judicial apathy. Though the road to justice was long and often cruel, Priyadarshini's name became a symbol of resistance and a reminder that silence is never an option. Today, nearly 3 decades later, the man convicted of her rape and murder remains behind bars, seeking release, while the people who fought for her are no longer here to see how this ends. This is a case that asks us difficult questions. What does justice look like? Who gets to decide when a sentence is enough? And what happens to the families left behind? As we await new developments, one thing is clear. The flame that Priyadarshini lit continues to burn in every protest, every petition, and in every person who chooses to remember.